All right, it's recording, and I'll record it now in Blackboard as well. Awesome. Okay, so two different ways to do exploded view. One way to do it is within the part file, and there's really nothing fancy to it. It's simply using the move body command. Actually, there is one new thing here, and this I think some of you may find helpful. If you have a design for your project where you have like a part that pivots like a hinge, some of you with cameras have like hinged parts. Um, Surin has like a band that could open up and close with Velcro. This first aspect I think will be beneficial for your concepts. It is using a new tab. This is a new thing in SOLIDWORKS we haven't talked about before. It's called configurations, and it's a way to save your file in different states, basically, as stated in different configurations. So here's the speaker I created in class. So if you look at the top here, um, often you're either in the feature manager design tree. So this is what I refer to just simply as the tree. Whenever you edit a feature, it brings up this like property dialog box. The next one over is called the configuration manager, and we haven't talked about it. So the way the demo starts is it asks you to select this tab, um, to click on the file name, and then, or is it right click on it rather, and then click on add configuration, okay? So again, yeah, so you go to design tab, add configuration. What this does is it allows you to save two different states. So in this case, for example, I'm going to say, I'm going to just name it explode. So, you could say like camera open or armband open. It doesn't matter. You can save it as whatever you want. um, so now we have two different states here. What this does is these are basically like, think of them as an on and off switch that remembers your settings in your tree of what is suppressed and what is unsuppressed. So to give the example here, to continue on the path of the exploded view, so we've created this new configuration. Because it's highlighted in black and the other one is grayed out, we are now in the exploded configuration. We go back to our tree tab, and then we simply just load the move body command. And again, if you don't have it, you can search for it up here. The move body command, you simply select the part you want to move. So in this case, this one. For an exploded view, it's typical to go in the direction in which it comes together, which I think you all know by now from other classes, I presume. So in this case, I just grab this z-axis and drag it forward. I make sure that copy is not checked, and I check that box. And now it's like this front face has come to the left. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the back here. I'm going to select move body, select the back, slide it back, make sure copy is not checked, check that box. And there is our very simple exploded view of the speaker, right? And how it comes together. Now, the way the configuration tab works, if I come back here, because I created a new configuration and added these two commands while I was in here, if I go back and double click on default, those two new commands become suppressed because they were added in this configuration. So, for example, that's like the automatic way to do it. That's the way that SOLIDWORKS remembers it, is creating a new configuration, adding a couple more commands here, and then going back to your default will like undo the commands you just did. And by undo, really, it's just like turning them off. They're still here, right? Another way to think about it is basically configurations just remember whatever is suppressed or unsuppressed. So if if you have a camera and you have a move body command to open the back, you can have a configuration to toggle between open and closed. I guess now that I think about it though, you will be taking those into Keyshot, so you probably want both. You won't probably want those commands unsuppressed. Regardless and copied. So for example, if you wanted to do an exploded view in Keyshot, you could bring this in as a completely new part. If you only wanted to bring in one part file, but have everything you need, then I would check copy in these move body commands. The reason for that is now when you go into Keyshot, you have both the together view and the exploded view. So in which case, I mean, configurations are helpful if you're like, I mean, you know, I don't know, for example, way back when I worked on a water bottle with a flip top, and so I used a configuration for the open view and the closed view. It was helpful for meetings to like quickly switch between the two and talk about what it looks like open, what it looks like closed. There was also more moving parts. So it's more helpful, it's more useful in like if you're mainly viewing things in SOLIDWORKS and for like discussing things and being able to switch between two. If the goal is Keyshot, it's maybe not as necessary. It's just a handy thing to be aware of, I guess. Think of it as a master switch that remembers what's suppressed and what's not. And I mean, here you can see in the default view, I unsuppressed these, so it remembered it. Okay, any questions on that first part? Cool. Here it says, in the configuration tab, select default to toggle the exploded view off. Configurations are a way SOLIDWORKS saves suppressed and unsuppressed states. All right, next up is an exploded view in assemblies, which is where SOLIDWORKS has a specific way to do this. So a little bit of background here. So I'm going to suppress these again. I just want to take a minute to talk about this approach. This approach of designing a part like this shell around these guts in a part file, it's just a workflow approach. It's for the notion of simplicity and being able to build around parts. And it's a file strategy, so like components don't go missing. That said, it's definitely a preferential thing. So I've had some people ask about, and I know we've talked about this briefly, about working on this as an assembly, which is completely acceptable and is a good way to do it too. It's all preferential. So if you wanted to keep your components separate and work on the shell separate and then put them together in assembly, that's fine. And so again, this method is just it's just simply a workflow, and it's definitely based on preference. Most of my experience, again, whatever, I guess I'm not going to go down that road. It's basically preferential. That's the main point I want to make. Now, there is some shortcomings with this and some trade-offs. What you gain in file organization and maybe simplicity, you lose in some of these features that assemblies have, such as exploded views. So in order to do this next part, and if you want to do an assembly exploded view from a part file you created, there is an extra step, which I've already done for this demo, but it's actually, and it's a bit silly, but it's actually to save out, it's to select the bodies here and just hit delete on your keyboard, and it brings up the delete body command. The way that SOLIDWORKS does this is it brings it in as a feature command. So if I suppress, it's not like they disappeared completely. I can always bring them back by suppressing this feature. But it's simply deleting them and then saving this out as the back part. So I would save this as a new file, say speaker back. Then I would just repeat. In this case, I want to keep the front. So I would delete these ones. I would save this out as a new part file, save it as speaker front, so on and so forth. So this is like, I don't know if there's a formal term for this, but when I talk about it and worked with other people doing this, we call it parting it out. You take a single part file and you save it out as individual bodies to break it into individual parts to put it into an assembly. Definitely some engineers will frown on this. But it's something that is done to go from working within the part world and then breaking it out into the assembly world, to mate it as an assembly, to make it so that each body Each part gets its own like engineering drawing, so on and so forth. So designing all the components in a single part is definitely a design thing. It's not an engineering thing. Sometimes you have to go from the design world to the engineering world. The way to do that is at the end of the tree to just delete out the different bodies. The only other way, and maybe more proper way to do it, would be to plan ahead and build it in such a way that you can delete out huge chunks of the tree, but like still have the front face resolve and build. All right, definitely a bit of a deep dive tangent there. It's a long way to say that this is how I created this assembly here. Now, for the sake of file size, I flattened the tree. I basically made them dumb bodies. But so here we go. It's the same part file. It's just split into. It's just put into an assembly. Everything I believe is mated. Yeah. So if I show this for a minute. So once you are in your assembly, you would want to go to Insert and select Exploded View. You're then going to select one body at a time to drag it. I mean, it's very similar. It's like similar to the Move Body command. The interface is the same, but it allows you to do multiple moves in one go. Yeah, and then it saves it. It automatically saves it as a configuration. It basically just does, like, if the part file is the manual way to do it, this is more the automatic way to do it. So I'm going to go to Insert, and then Exploded View. It brings up this property dialog. So the first thing we're going to do is select one of these faces, like this one. Again, I'm going to select the Z-axis and just drag it forward. This is the confusing thing. Often my gut here is to go and click on this green checkbox, but the proper thing to do is to, if you click on the green checkbox, the whole exploded view will be done, but we're not done exploding it. We want to break this back part out. So what we're going to do is click Done here. The next thing we're going to do is click on this and drag it back, just like we did with the other one, and then click Done. That's basically it. I don't know if, I mean, again, this is just a kind of a simple exploration. If you have more parts, you can keep doing this. You can also drag things down, what have you. When you're done with all of this, you simply hit the green checkbox. And now you'll notice under here in configurations, I guess this is a bit confusing, it's hidden underneath here. You have to kind of expand this arrow. And I believe it's because this exploded view is a derivative, or it is made from this first default configuration. If I right click on here and click collapse, it'll unexplode it. If I right click on here and click explode, it will explode it. It's that simple. The most confusing thing, I guess, or maybe the longest part to explain this, was the breaking it out into part files. But again, it's simply just putting a delete body command at the end of your tree and saving them out as different file names and then assembling them in an assembly. So those of you that prefer the assembly method, the good news is it saves you that step. Again, the preferential thing is whether you prefer to work all in one file or work in two different files. For what it's worth, if you do prefer to work in assemblies, it is possible. My advice to you, if you're working in an assembly on this, is to start like a dummy version of the file. Just start with some basic extrudes and then build the assembly with the guts. Then once you have that done, you can always right click on here and say edit part. It's a bit confusing, or it can be for some, but I'm basically, oh, I thought I could get this to expand. Why is that not expanding? This highlight in blue is now basically my tree. It's as if I'm editing just this part now. I mean, the danger of working this way is you don't want to accidentally build features into the assembly, because that's not good practice. As long as you're kind of in this edit part world, and you'll know you are when this is blue and you see this icon up here, you know, I can create a sketch on this face, you know, some perforations or what have you for the speaker. I can extrude cut. Now I will say that it's just a bit clunky, or it can run a bit slower. But you can see I just put that extrude cut and it placed it into this part file here, or yeah, into this part file directly. And the reason why you might want to work this way is again, there's a benefit to being able to see the components and design around them. So if you go the assembly route, this is the route that I would take. Okay, any questions on assemblies or assembly exploded views? Cool. Again, exploded views are optional. I think if you do it for your final, I think that would look good. And that way, you know, it's just a different tool to learn and thing to show off and explore. But if you want to, if the section views are working for you and you're happy doing that, you can do that too. All right. Last but not least, and this is the part where it is important, because this next part, while exploded views are optional, this next part is a requirement. It is a recap, so if you have a really good memory back to project 1, you're probably fine. But I guess there's some slight differences for this project 4. Project 1, the drawing was pretty basic. This one I want something just a little bit more. So this, you know, please pay attention to this next aspect of the demo. All right, so let's say this is your part file. To create a drawing, you go to File, New, and click on Drawing. And again, this is all in the PDF. It walks through these steps. If I just show this to show what we're doing. So again, File, New, Drawing. Now the first thing we're going to do is set the page size to match the presentation size. So whatever PDF size you plan to use, I would just match that. That way you can get your layout how you want it, or you'll know how it frames up in your presentation. So we'll start there. So this is what pops up. So again, not standard sheet size, go to custom sheet size. I'm just going to go 11 IN by 8.5 IN. I've never tried this. I'll give it a shot. I wonder if I can do pixels. Yeah, I don't think it likes it. Please enter a number greater or equal to and less than. I mean, it is. It must not like the word px. Anyway, 11 IN by 8.5 inches. And then click OK. As far as I know, this is a SOLIDWORKS bug. I've always seen this. This tan thing is the page. This black border is the bug. I don't know why it doesn't resize and snap down. But anyway, you want this to match your presentation size. All right, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to place in your part file. So if it's already open, you'll see it here listed in Open Documents. If your component, and I believe, let me double check the syllabus, you only need to do this for the final. One orthographic drawing with 3 views and at least 6 major dimensions. I think it's only of the final, if that's not clear. It's part of, it's listed in this group of the final concept. So this, you only have to do this once, only for the final concept. So basically, if your final concept is open, you'll see it here. If you need to look for it, you can just click on Browse and find it. But anyway, I double click on there, and you'll notice now when I hover over the sheet, it's giving me a box. When I click, the way it defaults is it defaults to this front view. This is just what automatically loads. It defaults to the front view and to line work. So I'm going to click here. Now you don't want to click, you don't want to like hit the checkbox or hit escape or anything just yet. You'll notice that the default will load these other views as well, which makes your life easier. So the 3 views I want for the orthographic is the front view, the top view. So the way you do that is you just hover your cursor above the object, it aligns it, and then you hover it to the right, and you click here. And that's basically it. Those are the only views I want. I mean, you'll notice like you can go in every direction and get as many of these views, including an isometric. But once you're happy with, or once you have the 3 views, front, top, side, you can click this checkbox, and then you have your object. If you want to reposition it, you can always click on any of the views and drag it. You'll notice, see, it's keeping them all aligned, which is nice. Makes our lives easier. If I zoom way in, you'll notice that this corner is part of a sketch. I believe from the master. So if I hit Alt and V, I'll just simply turn that sketch off. These little plus signs, they tend to appear wherever there's like a cylinder or a hole. If you don't like them, you can just click on them and delete and simply delete them. I don't mind them. It's up to you whether you want to leave them or not. So that's the most important thing is, you can see there's a big one in the middle here, is the placement of your object. So it's, again, it's simply just clicking and placing. If for some reason the automatic loaded feature is different or it disappears, the way to do it is you go to Insert, Drawing View, and say Model. You select your model, and I believe it should load into the same dialog. Yeah. If for some reason the first view you click is not the front view, or if you want to like look at the settings that I have, let me escape out of here and delete this. You want to make sure that this is, like, look at this icon here, the set on the left side here. You want to make sure the front is pressed in. Or if for some reason you built it so your object is facing to the right, you can always click on the right view, and now when I click, it starts with that right view. So you can change what's shown with that starting. But then, of course, everything, can then be generated from that first view that you place on the page. All right, the next most important thing, so that's placement. And again, I want 3 views of the final. The next most important thing is dimensioning. So you dimension it the same way you would a sketch. If I go up here to my sketch tab, I click on Smart Dimension. You can just click on some of these lines. So I'm zooming in to get the widest selection. Now the requirement for the project is 6 major dimensions. So what I want is overall width, height, and depth. And then the other 3 don't matter, just as long as you have 3 more. But I mean, I'll give you a suggestion of what to do if you're not sure. So here's the overall width. Here's the overall height. We'll put the overall depth on this view as well. So some other things you could do with this tapering, you could have the most narrow part of the height, this back area. You could dimension, for example, this radius of the top. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then it could be something else like the port, or maybe I would maybe do like the height of each of these pieces. Like you could do this one. You could do this back piece. Okay, some notes on your dimensioning. Now this is important. For your grade, if I see any dimensions that look like this, well, here, I'll make a very obvious example at first. If you have your dimensionings overlapping, you're for sure losing points. Okay, so your dimensions should be clear. Now there is a best practice for dimensioning. And that rule of, and again, this is important because I will take off points for this. The rule of thumb is you never want to cross your dimensions if you can avoid it. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but right here, this is a cross dimension. The 63.5 is crossing the 78 3/4. All right, it's literally this point here where these are overlapping. A rule of thumb to consider is that the widest dimension should always be the furthest away from the object. All the smaller dimensions should be on the inside. Here, this one is kind of, I mean, you could, something like this I won't take off points for because you're technically doing the right thing. I mean, I think if you do something like this, I probably wouldn't take off points for, but I would probably circle it and say that's confusing. So just you want to offset these. Of all the options, this is the best practice here. It's staggering the 3 like this. I mean, something like this, like that's not ideal either. That's not good. Dimension drawings are important. I mean, you will do one at some point in your career. Could you just put that 13.97 in that top view? Yes, you could. And I'm glad you asked that question because here's another thing. There is some subjectivity to dimensioning. Depending on where you work, if you work for a corporation, they may have some certification or standard that they follow. in which case you will likely be trained on that method and will have to follow it. Or if you're working with a client and you're doing like drawings for them, you will probably follow that. You can always follow you will follow their standard and what they're doing. The short answer to your question is yes, you could put this dimension up here. The long answer to the question is some of these standards and some best practice in dimensioning, the advice is to keep the dimensioning grouped where possible. So, and the reasoning for that is the goal with dimensioning is that it's easy to understand. So that's why you don't want to overlap or cross them so that there's no confusion. The reason for grouping them, even though there's more chance of overlap, is like this view from the side, it then has a lot of information that someone can look at and understand. If your dimensions are kind of on different views, you may have to like scan more of the page or look for it. Again, it's all about clarity. So if you group them together, it's kind of like you only have to look at one view or one source or one image for the majority of the information, as opposed to having to hunt for it, so to speak. Again, there is a certain amount of subjectivity to that and preference. For this project and for your grade, the only thing, I don't mind if you have some up here and some down here. The only thing that I'm looking for is, I would say this is the main problem that I see is cross dimensions, and I will take off points for that. So that's just the main thing to avoid. I mean, if you want to take it a step further, I mean, I worked with someone who is very, what's the word? Very specific about the way they like their dimensions. And so they wanted these to like align, they wanted all the design dimensions to look very beautiful and well laid out. So it depends what you end up doing and where you go. Again, for me in this class, in this grade, all I care about is cross dimensions, so don't do that. And of course you want 6 dimensions. If I count, that's an easy thing for me to take off points for. If I count and you only have 2 dimensions or you don't have any dimensions, that's just going to be an immediate subtraction of points. Some preferences, again, I don't mind what, inches, millimeters, it's up to you. If you have a preference and want to change it, you go to the gear icon up here. And then you go to document properties, units, and here you could change it to inches, IPS. Click OK, and you'll see those all update. If you want to change this so that some are horizontal, you can go to this, again, it's the gear, then document properties. Now under dimensions, you want to go to linear, because these are all linear dimensions, except for this radius. But all of these are measuring distance. And here, the text position defaults to being in line with the arrow, similar to this. If you want it to be legible horizontally, you want to select this tab here and click on OK, and these then all update and flip. So that's how you customize a drawing. If you want to change the way the drawings look, if you click on this one, again, it defaults to this wireframe. It can be shaded. It can be with dotted lines. It can be fully transparent with solid lines. When in doubt, this is my suggestion. Just go with the default. I think some people like to do the rendered view. You can go either way. I would definitely. I mean, I guess between all of these, the only ones I don't really want this last one, although the lines are on here. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. This might be a bug, but typically this last view has none of these black lines. So I would avoid that one, and then I would avoid the far left and the far right. I would avoid. The dotted lines are okay, but you can see it can be just like really distracting. Again, my advice would be to do either the pure line work or pure line work plus shading. All right. Any questions on any of that stuff? I realize I forgot to mention this, so I'll mention that. Okay, cool. Okay, yeah. So this is all on there in the PDF. Let me just mention this last point that I forgot. Sometimes you may have trouble finding, let me change this view again. Now, actually, for what it's worth, I forgot to mention this. When I'm changing whether you see line work or shading, I'm changing it on the front view. This is known as the parent, and these are both the children. So whatever this main view does, the children will do. But I think if I change the view on this top one here, you see it just changes this one. So in order to get them all to change the same, if you want to undo this, you can just say, check this box, use parent style. If you want to change them all together, you want to change the first view you put in there. So let me mention that. Now the next thing that I forgot to mention from the PDF is in order to dimension, you need to have a line or a point to select from. If for some reason, let's say I'm trying to dimension the height here, right? So I'm going to hit D for dimension. I'm going to click on this bottom line. And then I'm going to hover on the top here and try and grab a point. There's really no point for me to grab. You'll see it actually defaults to the center here. So if you want to try and grab a point up here, the way to do that is actually to sketch a point in. So you want to go to your Sketch tab, look for this icon. It's just a dot or a little blue square, and click on that. And if I hover over here, now it gives me a midpoint to put that on. That midpoint I could not select with the dimension tool. I don't know why. It's an annoying SOLIDWORKS thing. So now when I hit D for dimension, I now have a point to grab at the top and a point to grab, or a line to grab at the bottom, and now I can have this dimension. This is the short answer here is you want to select make this dimension driven. The reason this box is popping up is because we added a sketch feature, which is the point. And so this is asking us whether we want the dimension to tell the point where to be, or whether we want the point to tell the dimension where to be. So anyway, the short of it is, if you're using points to help dimension your file, just select make this dimension driven and click OK. All right, there you have it. Any questions on adding a point or parent versus children of the drawing file? Oh, actually, sorry, I keep forgetting stuff. So that's how you create the drawing. You can save this as a drawing file, but then so I can just simply click save. It's going to save the part that's referencing it. So it's going to save over the speaker. So I'm just going to click save all. I can name this just whatever you want. So this will save the raw drawing file, but in order to bring it into your PDF, you just want to save as. And I mean, this is pretty straightforward, but I've had students ask me this in the past, and I had forgotten to mention it. So you go to save as, and you either can select down here JPEG or PDF. I would recommend PDF. Under options, you can change the DPI. I believe it defaults to 300, but you may want to double check that if you get something pixelated. And then just simply hit save, and now you have it outputs a PDF, kicks out a PDF for you to use. Here it is. And you can drop this into your presentation as is. Okay, now I think that's everything. Are there any questions on any of that? Cool. So you need this page only for your final design. So I'm expecting one page like this in your presentation. There was a question about Monday. So Monday you need to have, I'm expecting 6 renderings. 1 hero shot of 3 different concepts. So, okay, sorry, let me start again. I'm expecting 6 renderings. Those are 6 renderings of 3 concepts. So if you do the math, each concept has 2 renderings. The 2 renderings per concept, one is a hero shot, the other is a section view. If you want to keep it simple, you can keep that hero shot and just section it, provided you can see the components. I'm not too worried. That way you only have to really set up one render and just render one of it cut, one of it not cut, and you should be in good shape. And again, that's Monday. Okay. Let's take a 15-minute break. So just be back at 2:22. And then my intent was for the remainder of class to be feedback on your concepts. I'm going to hit stop.